And what we came to realize is that we had a very degraded situation. And in the 80s, I always tell the story how I constructed all of these sod and grass waterways in Burley County because we had all this water erosion. And every time we had significant rain, somebody was going to be coming in and asking for some assistance to install a grass waterway, where we never had one. And of course, our issue was we couldn't get the water into the profile. And when you can't get the water into the profile, nothing really functions the way it should. A whole number of things start to be issues. If you can't get the water in the profile, you're also not getting the oxygen in the profile. And so if you have a compressed situation like that, then you're looking at a scenario where a lot of the functionality of the soil has either degraded significantly or just stopped. And in addition to these pore spaces that you have to get the water in, and that you have to get the oxygen in, it's also how the biology moves. So it's how the biology moves in the soil. You got to have the pore space. So if you're going to build a road anywheres, you're going to typically mound up this soil and you're going to pack it. You'd all agree with that. You've all seen that. Huge machines that are going to make a number of repetitions, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to compress this soil. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking the pore space out. So these tiny pore spaces in between the soil particles are going to be compressed. And you want this because you don't want the water in the pool. Well, what we had done in Burley County over the years is, in a more subtle, slow manner, we had compressed our cropland soils. And when we had compressed our cropland soils and we wanted to get the water in them, that's when you see all these issues that occur, all these symptoms that occur. And so today we'll do two different soil demos this morning, and then we'll do one after lunch. This first one we'll look at is called a slate. And what I look at there is we'll take two soil heads, like so, and they have to be dry. And I want to do this in a manner that you can go home and you can do this at home. You can do it in a garden, you can do it in a high tunnel, you can do it on cropland, rangeland, heathland, doesn't matter. But you start with selecting soils, and you try to have soils that are somewhat similar as possible as soil type. It's not that I want to take a clay and a sand and I want two loams, or I want two sands. And then we start taking a look at the differences in management. So I have two very similar soil types today. And I have two very diverse management styles that were used on these two fields. Okay? And this particular one right here that Ken's got right there has had these items right here. It has no history of livestock, right? So livestock hasn't been on this land in probably 150 years. It has no history of cover crops. Cover crops don't play in. It has very low crop diversity. A very similar crop is grown on it each year. It has, and when I'm talking about crop diversity, I'm generally referring to the four principal crop types. There's cool season grasses, warm season grasses, cool season broadleaves, and warm season broadleaves. Those are our four principal crop types. Most plants are going to fall into those four categories. The more diversity we have in those, the more root exudates we have, the more balanced meal we feed the biology. So whenever we talk about the biology today, think in terms of people, because they're a lot like us. They like food, like we do. They like a home. They like moderate temperatures. So they're a lot like us. And there's all kinds of them, just like there are of us. And then it's had high soil disturbance. It's been mechanically tilled repeatedly for many years with some intensity. Then we have a soil here that has a history of livestock. Okay? So livestock has been on this land, has a history of cover crops, has a history of high crop diversity. So in other words, it's had all four crop types in its annual crop rotations that would be planted in the spring or fall. and it has low soil disturbance. So we're going to set these, we're going to place these in there. You're going to give me that one, right?
Yep.
Okay. We're going to place these in there, and when we put them in the water, they're dry, so the water is going to come in these pads. When the water comes in these pads, it's going to create pressure. If the soil particles are weak in glomalin, which is the glue of the soil, they'll have a tendency to slake, which is a peeling off. It'll just kind of peel off in little pieces and filter to the bottom. Even a good soil may slake a little bit, but the water will stay clear. Okay. When a degraded soil slakes, it'll get really cloudy. So we're going to go ahead and look at that pressure. The glomalin is made by a combination of the plants and the biology. Those two together make the glues. And without the glues, it's very difficult. And the glues are made from the fungi. They're the component of the soil biology that makes the glues. So the fungi and the plant together, there's root exudates that come off of there, and the fungi and the root exudates form the glue, and the fungi are very susceptible to soil disturbance. And so whatever we can do to minimize soil disturbance helps the fungi. Okay. So if we can, you know, like for instance, if we've been tilling it 3 times, how do we get to twice? How do we get to once? Whatever we can do to minimize the soil disturbance will help the fungi, helps the glues. Let's go ahead and put the soils in there. And let the water come in those. And let's kind of see what happens with it. Now, if you can't see this very well, you're welcome to come on over here. You don't have to, whatever you I don't know what your moderator told you, but you don't have to stay in your seat.
You don't have to ever stay in your seat.
If you want to walk on over here or just stand beside it, that's to me is a very simple item to do.
The only thing is that I think that what the people online are seeing is your back.
Yeah, sorry. I'll get my back out of the way a little bit. Okay, so if you take a look here, is there a difference in cloudiness between the two right now? Okay, so we're getting some difference in cloudiness. Now you can see why the name slake was given to it, because it slakes and just slightly peels a little bit, chips away at it, chips away at it. Now if I take myself back to the 1980s and it would rain in Burleigh County, and we would get water erosion in our cropland, I can understand why, because it would just melt the soils, just slake them with an inch or 2 rain, combine it with wind. It would just slake those soils and it would start to form water erosion. You cannot build soils if you have any wind or water erosion. You can't build soils. So you have to take that out of the equation somehow. So now we're getting a little cloudier look, and when that occurs, it's not just soil. It's everything else coming out of it too. Your nitrogen's coming out of it, phosphorus is coming out of it, potassium's coming out of it, the glomalin is coming out of it. I'm starting to see what normally, and we'll look at this a little bit later, but we're going to see, after a while, we're going to see a difference on the surface of these 2 containers, on the surface water. We'll see a difference on them after that too. But we'll let them work a little bit. If these soils, if I hadn't dried this soil, and I would have put it in this water, it would look just like this. And it makes sense. You got to think of it from an engineering viewpoint. There's no water is going to come in there then, is it? It would have equalized the pressure because there would already been water inside the bed. Okay, so they have to be dry. And what I normally do is take a couple pads, put them on the dash of the pickup, or put them on the sill of a window where the sun comes in. Leave them there for a week or 2. Turn them, let them dry. You can put them in the microwave, but it's not as good. It's longer. It's just not as good. So if you can let them dry in that manner, then go ahead, go to your cropland and find a couple of heads on fields that have been handled differently. Maybe one's got a history of hayland, or maybe one has had a history of more diversity. You know, and you can start to take a look at this So you always want to do them in a comparison manner so that you see. And then if you want, you can go to your rangeland and you can put a pen in there and compare it to your crop. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of how much work you have to do. So all of these situations can occur. And you can see as it comes in and it starts to create that pressure, if you're weak on glomalin, if you're weak on the blues are the secret. That's what holds these soil aggregates together.
Is that like, you know, like if you dig up soil and you have those little tiny fine threads that hold those nodules? Is that what you're talking about, that glue stuff?
Well, you can't visually see the glue.
Oh, okay.
When you take the soil, you can't visually see the glue. Okay. But when you do this, now you can, if you want to take a look at the surface here, now we're starting to see a difference on the surface. So if you take a look at this one, it's virtually clear. If you take a look at this one, you're starting to see some foam. Okay. And sometimes if you ever drove down a road after a big rain and the water is waiting at the culvert and it's swirling, what do you see there? Oh. So you can, and like I said, don't come on over, folks. I mean,
I went to Eco Ed.
You want to do what?
With my kid. I went to Eco Ed. I got to see this. It was really neat.
Very good. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can start to see the foam and it'll have that kind of slippery feel. Okay. When the root exudates occur, I suppose we got to be a little careful here so that we don't get soil on the rug.
Oh yeah, Ethel
Okay.
will hate me for that.
We don't want Ethel to be on that side. And we'll just leave this set here today, but you can start to see the foam pull up to the surface here. Something I want to show, we'll show this to the people that are online. Can you see the root mass? Can they reply?
They're muted, so
Oh, they're
there's
muted.
no
Okay.
reverberation.
Okay. Well, there's.
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, there's.
Fantastic.
She unmuted herself.
Fantastic. Okay, this is annual ryegrass. I've used it as a cover crop, and you can just see the root mass in there. And if you notice, there's something covering those roots. There's a coating. Okay, they're not shiny clean, are they? Okay. I'm just going to show you folks around the room here. There's a coating on them, right? Do you agree with that? They're not shiny clean. They're not like the end of this one. Here,
You sure lick it off.
I don't know why I do that. But you see that coating that's on it. Okay. That's a good example. What happens is, first of all, you're building soils. It's the soil biology that builds the aggregates and puts the pore space back in. Again, you want to clean my big set. He's I've got a magnifier on the big set. We'll get a certain age. And if you start taking a look at those, and you can see how tiny they are, and they're hooked together. Okay. Now, why would that soil just adhere to that? Why would it stick on there like that? Why wouldn't it just be clean? Why wouldn't it be more like this, where it just comes right off?
Because roots are hairy.
Yeah. There's probably a little bit more to hang on to. Exactly. You're on the right track. The plant's going to give off the exudates. Okay. These are simple sugars. This is carbon in the form of a sugar. All plants do this. Now, we're harvesting sunlight. The plant's going to take that sunlight, and eventually it's going to put the carbon into the soil. Carbon is the currency of exchange in the soil between the biology and the plant. Okay. Currency of exchange. How you buy stuff in the soil. In Europe, it's the euro. In the U.S., it's the dollar. In the soil, it's carbon. Okay. Now, when it gives off those exudates, that's a simple sugar. they're going to just adhere on. Okay. So it's a good illustration. If it was midsummer and we could visit a corn plant, we would nip off some of the ends. And when you taste them, you would taste a very sweet taste, a very pure. And that's it. Now, why would it be sweet? Why did nature make it sweet? Why didn't it make it saltier? Or did it make it neutral? Why didn't
The complex carbohydrate, so
it's
give off energy?
It's a sugar. Exactly. The biology is going to come over to the plant. Why?
Oh,
Because that's where the refrigerator is. Again, think of us. Wouldn't we go over to the refrigerator? Sure we would.
The cookie jar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the cookie jar. It's the cookie jar. And there's cookies in it. And so the plant's going to give this off. The biology is going to come over to this. We have a blackboard.
We do. Let me see if I can get it uncovered here.
If we could. And what's going to happen is that's where the biological party is going to occur. It's right next to the plant. And there's all sizes. You've got the nematodes, the protozoa, the fungi, the bacteria, the actinomycetes. You've got a plethora of biology, and they're in different sizes. Big, medium, small. Okay? Think of them too like the jungle. If you get everybody together in the jungle, what happens? The big guys typically eat the little guys. Same thing happens in the soil biology. The protozoa and the nematodes are going to eat the bacteria. When they do, they're going to excrete the excess nitrogen in a plant usable form. And when you were in school, one day you would have learned about a term called mineralization. That's mineralization. That's the cycling of nutrients. And it happens, we can use this, we got a marker.
There's
Okay.
purple, red, whatever colors you wish.
These are all right
I'm gonna
down here.
turn around here. I hope so.
We got carbon nitrogen ratios that differ in the biology. So the protozoa, which eats a lot of bacteria, doesn't need all of the nitrogen that's in the bacteria, so it's going to excrete that additional in a nitrate form. Now it's usable. Okay? Before it wasn't. Before it was in a very safe environment. It's not going to leach. Doesn't matter how much it rained. It wasn't going to leach. Now after that occurs, it's in a plant usable form. Now it's very volatile. Now you're into nitrate. So the C-N ratio controls a lot of this. The C-N ratio of the soil is 10 to 1. 10 parts of carbon, 1 part nitrogen. That all stems from soil organic matter. If you take 1% soil organic matter, you are going to have approximately 10,000 units of carbon and 1,000 units of nitrogen. Now, when I was in high school in Strasburg, North Dakota, and we would do the math on that, we would come up to what? Reduce that fraction down, that ratio down, you'd get 10 to 1. So, knowing what a C-N ratio is of the soil is your foundation for knowing how carbon-nitrogen ratios work. Carbon-nitrogen ratios to me don't mean much to people, myself, until you understand that part. When you understand that part, that everything in the world is going to decompose down to that 10 ratio. When a deer dies in the cornfield, he's got to decompose down to 10. And you know, the residue in that field is going to decompose down to 10 soil. Everything decomposes back to 1. Now, if you take the corn residue, that's probably 80 to 1 or 80 to 1 carbon nitrogen ratio. So the soil's got, the biology has to run some nitrogen to decompose this down. But they will eventually decompose it down. Who's the principal decomposer in the world in soil biology? Anybody?
A worm? Smaller than that?
Worms do some work on that. Yeah, it plays a role.
Fungus.
Bacteria I would put in second place.
Fungus.
Fungi. Principal decomposer in the world. If we didn't have it, and you looked out in this cropland field right to the south here, it would have 30 years of residue in it, 50 years of residue, 100 years of residue. Wherever the wind had blown, it's not going to decompose. The bacteria can't decompose that because the fungi are equipped to handle the complex chains. They can go ahead and decompose these high carbon nitrogen ratio complex chains, and then the bacteria can come in behind them. Okay. So the fungi play this very important role. And I would give the bacteria, which can handle the simpler chains, probably second place. But this is a big important item. Okay, so that's the slake. Any questions on the slake? Now take a look at the surface of it. Now it's covered. Okay, so it just cubed it out. Just gave it up.
What is the foam? What is it?
That's the blue meal. That's the principal part of the blue meal.
So you're actually losing that when it turns to foam.
So it
and
still
goes
has
away.
some blue meal in it. But we see nothing on this side because we're not going to get it up.
So what happens to it then once it's released?
It's like a food. If soil biology doesn't have its principal food source, which is root exudates, let's say you have no plants out there that year, it's going to eat blue meal. Everything's food in biology. They'll eat each other. They'll consume whatever they need to.
That sounds amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So it gives you a principal idea. Then what we'll take a look at next is the infiltration. This is a runoff example. And Thursday I have the Bismarck State College Ag students out. Where 47 students came out in 4 different groups through the day. And we ran the rainfall simulator, we ran slake, and we ran infiltration runoff. This field here is out of the Minokan farm. Both of these soils are totally saturated. And we ran them 4 times Thursday, 1 inch each time. They're totally saturated. And so they're not eager to take more water on. Okay. This particular one here, should back up. Give you an example of what's going on here. These little stainless steel trays, we call them cutters. And you can see the soil is held in place by this mesh on the bottom. So we take these cutters and you take them out to the field, you put them down, and you put a block of wood over them, you take a mallet or a big hammer and you drive them flush. And then you take your spade and you feather it underneath. Then you pop these out and you take a knife and you clean them off nice and level and you put the mesh on them so that it stays in place. Okay? Then you have yourself a pretty untainted system to go ahead and do a demo. Okay? So this particular field here, this soil here, we took out of the plant farm, the Minokan farm, and it's been into this system for 5 years of high crop diversity, minimal disturbance, livestock integration, and cover crop. What difference would a cover crop possibly make in any of this?
Additional roots to keep the soil from eroding.
Yeah, but you just grew a crop all year. What do you need more of those for?
Collect snow in the wintertime.
Yeah, collect snow. What's the principal food source of biology? From a live growing plant. So if you lock the refrigerator door at harvest time, there's no more exudates that fall. Okay. Now I don't know how that would work in your house, but that wouldn't work in my house. I need that refrigerator door open. And so what happens is, we used we used to terminate all plant growth at harvest time. Then when we started moving into the cover crops in 2006, we started getting a better understanding what the biology needs. And we started looking at the cover crops, and we started looking at strengthening these soil functions. The other thing it does when you bring a cover crop in, if you choose to, and I'll show this to the screen here, there's just kind of a plethora of different species here of cover crops that can be used. And what happens is, if you choose to, you can use more than one species. You could use 2. You could use 3. You could get really out of line and maybe put a dozen. Now, what would be the difference between using 1 versus using 10? What possible benefit could there be? Different, you're feeding a more balanced meal. Right? When you feed one plant type, when you give one plant, that's one type of root exudate that benefits probably some portions of the biology more than others. When you use a multitude of plants, you have all of these different items on the menu. At noon today, are you going to eat just broccoli? No, I'm not. I want to have a number of different things because I'm healthier, I'm stronger when I do that. And what we found is when we do that in soil biology, it starts to change that picture. So the other thing you can do that goes back to this carbon-nitrogen ratio now, we said the carbon-nitrogen ratio of the soil is 10 to 1. When you plant a crop in the spring, can you change the carbon-nitrogen ratio of that wheat crop or that corn crop? It is what it is, right? But if you plant a combination, let's say, for instance, you put a cover crop in the fall and you put in pea, and you put in turnip, and maybe you put in a little radish, and let's say you put in a little flax. What else could we put in? Maybe we put in a little barley. Now, all of a sudden, can I adjust the carbon-nitrogen ratio? Yes. I can make it go higher, or I can make it go lower. Because some plants are very high CN ratio plants, some are very low. Or I can come up with kind of a middle-of-the-road CN ratio. Okay? So now, all of a sudden, we can adjust that. If we come in there with a low CN ratio, cover crop, it's going to decompose our residue quicker. Our surface residue is going to decompose much quicker. If we come in there with a high CN ratio cover crop, the residue will last long. So we can start to adjust some things. If you want to release nutrients sooner, we use a low CN ratio. If you want to have the residue released later, you can come in with high CN ratio. All keeping everything in mind, the CN ratio of the soil is 10 to 1. Kenny, what would P be? Maybe 15 to 1? Roughly? And probably same with turnip and radish. They'd be real low. Now these are higher. What's barley? Maybe 60?
No, 60. Again, it depends on what
Time
growth
of year.
stage it is, too. If you
Growth
plant it in the
stage.
fall,
Yeah.
it would be quite low.
Yeah. If you came in here with corn, you're probably something like 80 to 1. So there's all different ratios. So the adjustment of the CN ratio, when this thing gets averaged out and you compare it to the soil, you're going to have a real good idea. If your final CN ratio is maybe 25 to 1, it's going to decompose really quick. If your final CN ratio is maybe 60 to 1, it's going to take longer. Okay.
I just had the thought of all the weeds that grow in my garden. So if I left my weeds growing in the fall or something, what kind of a carbon ratio do they add to the soil?
Yeah, they're going to give off a root exudate. I think a weed comes down to, well, first of all, it's that plant out of place in someone's mind, right? Right. Yeah. And in a garden setting or a crop setting, it's probably more the seeding out of that plant than it is anything else. So if you prevented it from seeding out, what's going to hurt? Probably not much of anything. The thing you want to keep in mind, one of the principal differences between classical weeds and production crops is the conversion of water to biomass, or the conversion of water to a grain. Our production ag crops are much more efficient than that. You know, a weed is put out there basically to heal. There's something not quite right. Maybe there's nothing else growing, or maybe infiltration needs to be improved, or deep cycling. The weeds out there are going to perform some function for nature to start a 100-year process to heal. And we look at it and go, oh my God, I got to do that. So you look at that whole situation. The plants, production ag plants, are probably more efficient than that once you can bring in the legumes. You know, we had a garden tour this summer, and as a party favor, we had packets of cover crop combinations. So when you were done with part of your garden, you could take that packet and plant your garden to the remainder of the cover crop. Crazy stuff.
But the weed roots, so let's take.
There are 4 other callers on the call.
Some annual grasses like foxtail, yellow foxtail or something, that's growing in my garden. Are those roots then producing that same amount of sugar? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily the same amount. You know, everything gives off a different amount.
Yeah.
But weed has to have the biology to grow, just like a non. So it has to give off an exudate.
And then when it comes to after you, let's say in the fall, you've seeded a cover crop, what do you do in the spring then? I'm wondering about tilling.
Are we talking gardens?
Well, I guess particularly, I just have a garden.
Okay.
That's the soil
Yeah.
I work with.
Yep. If we're talking about a garden, part of the talk usually at the garden tour is the evil of the rototiller. Yeah, people like that because most of them have a new one setting in the yard somewhere.
It's violent to this biology.
It comes down to this disturbance factor.
I've been gardening my entire life and have never owned a rototiller, you guys. Never.
We have no disturbance at the Middleton Farm Garden. Not no potato production either.
So when you remove the cover crop, or you don't remove it?
We typically don't remove it.
Okay. So in the spring you just plant up.
Yeah. And we've used mulch, straw mulch, we've used fabric barrier. Okay. And we've used different methods. Yeah, I like that residue there.
But your neighbors think you're a messy gardener.
But you don't till that residue in, it just stays on.
So in your garden, Minokan, do you do anything for aeration? Use a broad fork on it, or are you just poking your finger in there and putting the plant in?
If you build soil aggregates, you will get the water and the air into your soil. You got to have soil aggregates. Think of it this way: how did we all get in this room? We came through that door. And when water goes into a soil, it looks for the same door. It's got to find a pore space. And if we don't have that, this animal here is impressive looking, but doesn't do much for infiltration other than punch a hole one place. Okay. This is the workhorse. This is the workhorse building the aggregates. Now, if you want to get crazy, you put them together. Then it gets even. More than either alone, if you want to improve infiltration. And if you want to get a little crazier yet, you can take these different legumes and small grains on here, and you can put those in there with it. Because they're all building soil aggregates. The name of the game is building soil aggregates, which results in the pore space. That's a foundation principle on a soil. We have to have that. If we don't have that, we're going to have to do something to that soil.
So sweet clover and alfalfa, big plus.
Oh yeah, well any plant
Because
is,
they go deeper.
yes, and they're legumes. Do that. Yeah, they would be good to have in the mix. If you look at this one, you're going to find clovers in this one. You're going to find them. Yeah, alfalfa Alfalfa is good at healing the soil. Alfalfa and grass together are better.
Any kind of grass in particular that you, when you say the word grass, because there's thousands out there.
This one is an annual rye. Right, Ken? It's an annual ryegrass. Oat is very fibrous too, you know, so that, you know, they're all in the grass family. So you might find some you like better. This year when
So my quackgrass doesn't.
quackgrass is going to build soils.
Oh, good, because I
No
got
doubt,
it growing around
no
the
doubt.
edges,
But
so
I think
can't get rid
maybe
of
the
it.
key is the word annual. Is that true?
Oh,
So that
annual
it's not
grass.
coming back perennially.
It depends on what your objectives are. If you want something that, you know, if you want to, you can use an annual, you can use a biannual, you can use a perennial. But a lot of it depends on what you want to do the next year.
Right, so if I want to plant over the top of it, I don't want it.
You might want
Perennial
to
grass.
go with an annual. Now we got ag production systems where we like to come in with a biannual in the fall. We work with some farmers out of southeast part of the state. Wet conditions, there are no tillers. We typically will put a cover crop of rye or winter wheat in the fall because they need to drive on that in the spring. It's got more load bearing. So they want to buy in. So it all depends, you identify your resource concerns. Okay, now we just got this runoff demonstration recently, and the first time we used it was this week, in fact. And I took it home the night before because I just had it in the box and I never put it together, and I'm sitting there on the living room floor and I have no life, and I'm trying to figure out how this thing works. And finally I had to go to my iPad and go to YouTube, and I had to punch in tabletop infiltrator, and then it popped up on there, and it said, okay, here's how you do it. And it's simple. But it's amazing how many different ways, combinations I had put together before centering in on this one. So you go ahead and you take the cutters, you cut your soils. This soil here is the same as this soil right here. We know it doesn't have much for pore spaces, okay? I took these from the same fields, okay? These two are not the same. These are two different ones. And like I said, this ran 4 different times. Well, it ran on Tuesday. We ran it Tuesday for the Bismarck High School students that were out, and then Thursday the Bismarck State College students were out. So it's had 5 inches of rain on it this week. But we'll go ahead and run some water. Ken, if you want to pour some water in.
Another thing I forgot to say, he basically tilled this. He went with his little spade, tilled it to make it fluffy so water's supposed to soak in.
I took my tillage tool here. And this one is quite soft. If you want to come and take a look at these before we run them, go ahead. This one is just soft as can be. It's, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how soft it is. If you don't have pore spaces, that's not going to help. Now watch me get proved wrong. Oops, oops. So what we do then is put the little trays on top. These little the infiltration buckets on the bottom, they got little tabs on the back side to give them a little elevation. So there's just a slight elevation for the front, okay? And this water is supposed to be enough for a good inch of water coming on it. Let's go ahead and pour that in. These things are really looking forward to more water running on them. So see if we get some water into the infiltration buckets.
It reminds me of a coffee percolator.
Yes, it does. And it looks a little like coffee, too.
Well, I'll have to take a break after this to use the restroom, right? After all that water sound.
Okay, observations.
That's amazing.
What are we seeing and why? What are we seeing?
Well, nothing made it through that soil at all.
So
Came
what,
off the surface.
when we know it doesn't have pore spaces and lacks the glues, etc., it's not, to me at this stage, it's not surprising that that ran. And it doesn't matter how much we go in there and work it up. It doesn't matter. There's no door. Like we all tried to get in this room, but that door wasn't there. Can't get in the room.
So is this a loam or?
Yeah, these are both loans.
They're both loams. Okay.
Yep. Correct. And this this management here is the same management. If you don't have cover crops, you don't have as many root exudates, you don't have as strong as biology. If you don't have livestock, what difference would livestock make?
They disturb the soil and spread the seeds and
Herd
add
im-
some manure and some more little like
Herd-
bacteria.
herd
things.
impacts? Yeah. What's an even bigger item?
Well, they're providing more fuel for the biology, aren't they?
I agree. And they're actually providing biology. Now, the biology in the rumen, what does it do?
Breaks down.
Breaks down stuff, right? So that they can eat. The biology in us, what does it do? How we digest our food, the digestive process. How many pounds of microbes do you have inside you?
Quite a few.
About 3 pounds. So we all have, on the average, 3 pounds of microbes we can't live without. We would die. The biology in the soil. The biology in the rumen breaks down stuff. The biology in us breaks down stuff. What does the biology in the soil do? Breaks down the digestive process of the soil. Okay. So you start looking at this whole thing. Livestock plays such a big role. Animals, and plants, and soils, did they not evolve together? You've read the journals of Lewis and Clark. If you haven't, you need to. It's one of the best reads. I've read a couple of different, Devoto is okay. Trying to think of the other author. He's a little better, a little more conversational style. Name doesn't come to me now. When you read the part from Pierre to Bismarck, is really interesting. The whole trip is interesting, but I think that part is the most interesting. And they describe the landscape. It's just fascinating because a lot of times they almost can't see the landscape because of the animals. Okay, between the deer and the elk and the bison, etc. And they describe it so well in there. It was just unbelievable. So all of this evolved together, and on the plains, we had a totally sustainable ecosystem. When the bison were removed out of that ecosystem, what do you think happened to all the predators that were linked in with them?
They moved on.
The first year when the 2 or 3 of the bison were slaughtered, their numbers probably just went out of sight. They probably just escalated because the food supply was all over. Because most of the bison weren't taken for food. You know, they harvested the tongue and maybe the hide. But most of the meat just stayed where it lay. So now you look at that whole scenario after the meat was gone, do you not think there was a general collapse in that ecosystem? Yeah. And of course we have the collapse in the grasslands. So long story short, you start looking at the impacts of livestock. It has a lot to do with the populations, with the biology. You start looking at cover crops, with the food supply, extending the period of time for the biology to eat, okay? And a more balanced meal, not just one food type. You start looking at the crop diversity that you can put in there in the spring, and you start looking at disturbance factors. These are basic principles to build the soil. Questions of anyone? I think there was an online question or two. I thought some note came in.
I've always thought that manure was fuel to the biology of the
Nutrients.
soil.
Yep, and then it does.
But
More so.
what I'm learning now is that that fresh manure is adding also biology to the
Yeah.
soil.
It's the milk foam that's coming off of the cow, or whatever the animal is. It's the milk foam, it's the hair. It's all laden with biology. It's the manure, it's the urine. If I had to choose, and I could only have the biology, or I could have the pure nutrient out of the manure and the urine, I'd probably take the biology. But if I can have both, that's okay too. And most of the nutrients in the urine, most of the nitrogen's in the urine. Urine, urea, that's nitrogen.
So when you talk like tillers, don't most organic farmers follow?
Yeah, a lot of them do.
But why?
I work with organic producers in
Yeah. So if you're talking no till.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. One of the things you're going to see come out of Ken and I is I didn't say high tillage, and I didn't say no till. I said how do we go to less soil disturbance? So I'll give you an example. One of the organic producers I work with in Burley County, he had a 3-year rotation, 2 years of crop, and he went to a year of summer fallow. And during that year of summer fallow, I think if I recall correctly, he worked at a minimum of 4 times during that year of summer fallow. Okay. We went to a cover crop. Now he still has tillage, but we went from 4 tillage operations to 1, and we added food. So how do you move toward less disturbance? Less disturbance. How do you move to less disturbance? You know, there's people that are trying to bring together our production systems, trying to bring together the organic and the no-till systems together. And if that could be achieved, that's a good thing. I'm not there, but I'm willing to listen to anyone who is, because that's probably the pinnacle.
So here's a personal, practical question. I haven't tilled my garden yet this fall.
Good man.
But if I put leaves and some manure on it this fall, which is my intention.
Typically, we
Should
put
I
that
work
on
that
and then work
yeah.
it in so that it can decompose in the soil and
Yeah.
provide nutrients. But
Yeah.
and then it looks nice.
Oh, doesn't it?
It's great.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
So if I put
But confession is so good.
yeah. Get it out.
Jane, just so you know that Mike's a pastor.
It's okay.
Send
And
it to Bill.
and he understood that
So
part
that,
really
yeah,
well.
so that you can relate to him
He
now.
understood that really well.
so help me here.
Sure.
If I put the leaves on and the manure, I'm gonna want to till that in the spring at least. I think prepare the soil.
Really?
No,
But,
you
it-
just,
but you're saying it doesn't have to be tilled in. It still has its value.
Oh, yes.
Surface.
The more active, here's the way that kind of works. The more active the biology is, the more benefit you're going to get out of the surface materials. If the soil is really degraded and the biology is kind of dead, that first year especially is kind of a slow start because you're not getting the full benefit out of that you could. But you have to start somewhere to revitalize. And we don't do any incorporation of manure or cover crops in Burley County at all.
But you do application, or do you apply it, or do you,
Cover crops
no manure? Do you apply manure?
in our cropping systems?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but you don't incorporate.
No, don't incorporate.
Okay, you apply but don't incorporate.
Correct. Correct. The optimum is to have the cattle out there in the wintertime on these fields. That's the optimum. Yeah. Okay. Any questions that we need to address, or we?
everybody here's fine.
Okay. What Ken and I kind of talked about for today, we talked we'd do kind of an opening with the soils, and I have 2 presentations that I would be willing to do, or if you have a different thought, we can do that too. One of them is a basis of soil health for cropping and grazing systems, and shows results of actual farmer results in terms of things that we're looking at in biology in the fields. The other one is one operation in Burlington, and we would look at it from where it started to where it stopped. And we can do that as well. And I don't know if we wanted to talk about anything programmatically or not. I don't know if you were interested, or if there was any interest in classical USDA and NRCS programs.
Resources, that's the word I used earlier.
We can touch on that. We can touch on that today if you choose. Okay. I don't see that as important, but sometimes people want to talk a bit about it, so we can do that too. And then Ken, you were looking at some different items.
Yeah, I was gonna go through, kind of how I built a grazing system on my place, because I farm and ranch, plus I work for settlements. So I was gonna go through some of the work we did at some plot, how we started with cover crops, and give it a background, and then why we use cover crops. So I got 3.
And we can take as many breaks or change as many things. And then after lunch, we'll do the rainfall simulator and look at it. So that kind of brings me to the end on this particular opening part. Unless there's any other questions. Ken, did you want to go next?
That I sure can.
Okay.
I could kind of go through.
Ken's a lot older than I am, so we kind of pace him a little bit.
We gotta sit down.
I'll fill in for him.
Oh my gosh.
Falter, but,
You guys want to take a break and we'll load his PowerPoint and get this all set up?
Reload the coffee.
So if I have hairy vetch planted in my hoop house and it's just only that big, that's not very big.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Something
I
growing.
was like, I think I got it in too late.
Most of it, there's some right here. Most
Oh
of-
yeah, yours is way bigger than
Well,
mine.
most of the benefits underneath.
And so will the seeds that didn't come up in the spring on their own probably? I was thinking it probably didn't get enough light in there.
So, thinking just quickly here, thinking about like this hoop house,
Mhm.
and then in the winter you keep
Oh.
chickens in there.
This one?
And then
No, that's your,
I'm gonna start out with, let's see, building soil.
Yep.
this one?
No, let's see.
That's the line,
I got
huh?
some darn medium in there.
I
Keep
know,
on
it's
down.
just, whoops.
I got the Y
Am I
cover
going-
crops. Let's see.
Yeah, I haven't done it, but I've heard people talk about.
I should have cleaned
everything
some of
from
these up.
hogs to calves to chickens. There.
'Cause I thought I had one
Yeah.
in two, oh yeah, this one's line of 2013.
I
yeah.
think that
Come for a tour of your hoop house, because I really don't know what that is.
Building soil.
you certainly could. I have a Four Seasons, which is a really, yep.
I don't know if you want to put these other ones on right away, then put the Y cover.
I
But-
might even-
I don't think you can't run chickens in your hoop house if Equip pays for it, right?
Yeah, Equip definitely takes some of the sting out of it.
Yeah, and you can't put tables in, like I want to put my transplants out there. I don't think you can do that either in an
Tables?
Equip. Yeah, like greenhouse
I
tables
wouldn't see a
for,
problem with that myself.
I mean, after the first year,
then they won't come back.
Intershed doesn't give a damn.
Well, I had
Just
to, I
kidding.
borrowed money from farms to put up my hoop house because I only have 1.25 acres out there and I don't qualify, so.
Well, it doesn't matter how many acres you have.
No,
Somebody said you had to have 2 for them to consider it.
that should be
Minimum
on
Those
that
2?
one.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to line these up on the desktop so you guys can find them right by name. Let's do that. Okay, so we got 2 off of there. This was amazing, Jay. I learned so much this morning. It was cool.
So what, in reality though,
Go ahead.
a beginning farmer,
So did I only have 1, 2, 3? Did I pull 2 off of yours? And
Yeah, Y cover
Oh,
crops.
just-
Okay, you've
just
got
starting
your
out.
2. Okay.
No help, anyone? I would think very good.
Boy, look at all those.
I
You must
know.
go out and present an
Well,
awful
we were in
lot.
Australia, or wherever. Let's see, this one should have been the cover crop plot.
Okay, so would it start with C? crop response or
Oh,
plot.
up in Burleigh County.
Burleigh, okay.
Burleigh County plot 2008. Try that one. I should just pull that up. Or no, it's one or the other of them.
Oh, is there another one? Did I miss that?
Copy of Burleigh County plot 2008.
Okay, that might be a newer one.
Now, this one's just 2008 too. I don't know why it's
This one was
March.
opened on
Okay,
2010.
try that.
This one was opened on
Try
2013.
and take that one now.
So
So I
I
kind of
think-
updated some of that.
Okay,
after a
I
while,
think
yeah.
that is, okay, that's the one we got right here.
Okay. What's
Well, you can certainly leave this in case you want to go back and find
Yeah,
something else
yeah.
also in there, so you want to start with
I'm going to start with building soil. Kind of give a history.
yeah, I love that hoop house. I can't even tell you how much I love that thing. And you're gonna have to advance it like that.
What, on this one here advances?
Yep, up or down. Oh, I think the down one. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have a. I guess if we turn the projector so we can see it, that would be helpful. And then I have to make sure that they can see your screen and not mine.
Some countries have made
So webcam on.
principles. Not, and then, you get into that whole thing.
No.
Infringements, rights, and all those type things. But I don't know how you redistribute.
In North Dakota, that's long.
Okay, so now I have to hit show my screen,
Okay.
You know, I can't.
and then we're
how many times I've heard
good to go there.
I'll give you an example. There was a farm
Reviewing it.
sold out.
Okay, yep, I know that feeling. Okay, so then we go back here. I was doing a presentation one night, and the screen was split, and so I was reading one slide ahead of what was actually on the. My jeepers. Okay, you go away. Why won't this go away? Oh, for crying out loud, this did this to me the last time too. How can I hide this? There we go. Put it off to the side. And then, yeah, if you want to talk to it, you can.
Oh, okay.
So, and then I think. Oh, is that too dark for you folks in the back if we do this? Yeah, is it, they can see, I think, better on there with the lights off. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I don't mind being in the dark. I work in the dark all the time. It drives some people crazy. My husband,
And I think this one's yours.
No, I drank all mine.
You drank all.
You didn't drink none of yours.
Oh, I didn't drink any of it. Okay.
Just watch it out for you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the help. Yeah, I think we got, we got some real serious issues in agriculture. And that's one of them.
See, that's what. I live right in the middle of Maine, Dave.
Thing, doctor?
Yeah. The guy that owns, there's 300 acres that are owned by the doctor in South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been waiting, been renting 100 acres, waiting 10 years to sell. Now it's all about this.
Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
And that 100 acres of pasture is never, I've had 6 horses on both at one time.
Sure.
you're on.
Well, first of all, good morning. I work full-time for the Burleigh County Soil Conservation District, and I also farm and ranch. So to make those two things work, I've got to make things as simple as possible. And basically, I went from high soil disturbance to low soil disturbance throughout in the last, since the mid-'80s, and how it's changed the operation. Basically, I got into the rut, figuring I had to farm everything. Basically, I rented everything I could around me, got bigger and bigger, and went broke faster and faster. So again, our farm and ranch is about 25 miles south of Mandan along the Missouri River. It's some fairly highly erodible land, very light soils, can vary from pure sand to a gumbo clay pan. A lot of this land should have never been broke up in the first place. But I'll be showing some photos of as far as the terrain, some of the land that we farmed. But anyway, I basically went from renting a bunch of land around me to basically quit renting any land and basically concentrating, building soil health. So you need a lot less land. You can be very profitable at it. So just kind of a background. We basically, my wife and I are on the ranch yet. We raised 5 children. The children still have an opportunity to come back. My youngest son farmed with me for about 3 years, and he just couldn't take the financial pressure. It seemed like the generation right now, they want it all. It seemed like they want it all right now. I said, well, it's a lifetime commitment to farming. I mean, you just don't make it overnight, which again, a lot of these producers think that's why I was saying so much of the native range land has been broke up, because it's so simple cropping now. Again, the scenario, you can't fail with just the way our crop insurance, how that's all set up. So basically, the animals are leaving the land, and we got to bring the animals back. So I'll just kind of get through this first presentation. I'm going to kind of show how we built a system. Basically, I started out first with a grazing system. I guess I usually start this out as what is soil health. Basically, you saw some of these demonstrations here this morning. It's basically the capacity of the soil to function. Here we showed all the high disturbance. That soil wasn't functioning. The water couldn't get in the ground. So in order to grow a crop, you got to get the water into the soil. In my own situation, I always said we were always 10 days away from a drought on these light soils. Basically, if you didn't get a timely rain, your crop would fail. But this year we didn't have any rain from basically the end of May. June and July we had, I think we had about 40 hundredths both months. And that was 3 or 4 rainfall events of 8, 10 hundredths, which is basically nothing. Well, in the past, if I would have been tilling, basically we would have had a total crop failure. Well, this year we had actually had one of the best wheat crop I ever had. Our cover crop fields, basically we'll double crop some of them, like winter triticale and vetch. We planted them in, like say, end of August. Last year it was extremely dry. We had no rain at all in September and October. We finally got a little shower in October, and the triticale just came up. Well, in the spring we had no moisture at all till about in May, and then the floodgates opened. We had about the month of May and the first part of June we had about 14 inches of rain. So, but then after that, again, feast or famine, none. But again, by building soil health, you take away a lot of that stress on the crop, and you can get through a very lengthy dry period. So, and again, why should I care? Again, now my focus is more on what's happening below the soil. If I can feed those critters the soil biology, feed them a diet, keep the ground covered, they're going to work for you. And they work, so we want them to work as long as possible. So we'll grow a cover crop. We harvested some wheat in September. We planted a cover crop. People say, well, that's not going to amount to much. Top growth is maybe this much, but it's what's happening below ground that is so valuable. Just that 30 to 60 days of growth. Like I said, again, a turnip and radish, they won't freeze, so they'll be growing well into November. So again, I've got a living root growing as long as possible. Again, getting all that soil biology all in balance, and that then your nutrients get released. We cut our inputs, our fertility, basically nitrogen. We'll cut that down by probably 2/3. We have irrigated crop. I forgot to mention that. We irrigate about 250 acres, and the rest is dry land. But my goal is to seed everything back to grasses and legumes, so I get a perennial system growing with the intent of leaving it in a perennial. But again, a person could take it out, say about every 5 years, take your perennials out. You could grow a sustainable crop with basically no inputs. it's still, again, you build a healthy soil and things will work for you. Again, it's diversity with crop diversity, and by adding the cover crops. Again, before we basically grew just small grains, and sometimes we'd grow silage, corn for grain. We couldn't grow corn for grain on those light soils. Back in the tillage days, it would just, you'd always drought out. So it was always cut for silage, and again, you were taking it off. Where even our hayland, we'll again, when you keep taking the nutrients off the land, we'll end up putting them back on. So now we graze a lot of our hayland, and we bale graze in the winter, and I'll be showing some of that, again, trying to build it. And again, it's all about growing a living root as long as possible throughout the year, and keep that soil covered. This demonstration really showed it. You got cover here, just ran off, and there basically you got cover, and the water soaks into the soil. This kind of a before, again, we're 25 miles south of Manhattan. This is the Missouri River of Lake Oahe. This is a ridge of cut bank ridge, 200-300 foot high. Again, you can see all this white. That's a lot of your bentonite, clay pan, some very tough soils. Again, you can imagine the erosion off of that. So you've got deep gullies and ravines running basically to the river. So this is where the farmstead is. It's long and narrow, but basically the fort was basically season long. I guess we had two pastures. I acquired this quarter later. The original farm was, my dad's farm was here. My grandfather's farm was right here was my grandfather's farm. So the two small farms, Dad had 520 acres and Grandpa had about 800 and some. Then I added this 360, this quarter here, in later years. So this is basically a scenario of kind of a before, and that's an after. We started out with put in a grazing system in the mid-'80s, put in a deep pipeline for water, got over a mile of pipeline, and I started out with 18 paddocks. Again, a wagon wheel isn't probably the best system, but it's the cheapest, because your water is the most expensive thing. Building fence, electric fence is it's very cheap, and 5/10 of wire, very little material, so it works out. You can build a lot of fence in a short time. You know, we started out with 18 paddocks. These are roughly 400-acre paddock pastures. This was cropland that was seeded back to grass in the, well, that probably was in the late 60s, late 60s. This was seeded back. This was some real tough clay pan areas. This end, pure sand, hilltops here, steep hill, the ridge of hills on this side. And then on top of the cut bank, we had two fields up here. Those are in the process. We had seeded, they were seeded back to grass, and now but when we seeded them back, we didn't fix the problem. The tillage layers were still there, so we had a very weakened, degraded soil, so you had a very weak and degraded plant, so we had very little production. So by using cover crops without tilling it, we're building that back.
Can I ask,
Sure.
if you go
Yep,
back on
sure.
your wagon wheel,
Yep.
what would you have done differently, understanding the expense of moving?
Well, if you would have put in more water points, you could have blocked this out, so you would have more. But again, it's the terrain. Here you've got a cut bank ridge, so you fenced around it. But my goal is, I could see what, even along and narrow, what I noticed by the center, where it got the most herd impact, it changed the quickest. So that told me, the smaller you make the paddock, these are roughly 40-acre paddocks, and what I noticed was the impact by the center, the grass species shifted, because before, when it was season long, it basically was blue grama and Kentucky bluegrass, two plants that can basically take tremendous overuse, because it basically was all overgrazed. But by putting in the smaller paddocks, it created a way longer rest period. So you start building a deep root system, and again, a deep root system starts feeding the different soil biology. And again, we graze at different times of the years. Each year we do things different. So once you have a lot of paddocks, you can really change. Well, 40 acres was still too big, so my plan is to split them all again. So again, some of the issues I had with water, like through here, they have to climb a ridge, so they create a lot of erosion there, deep trailing. So what I did now, I run a pipeline across here, so I'm going to put another water point here, so that'll give me an opportunity. I can split this paddock, and they won't have to be able, they'll have a water point here. They won't have to utilize this one up here. You know, actually I could fence this here off here and heal that basically bale graze down here too, so I could bale graze on that steep draw or hillside. And again, putting a water point here, cut down this real narrow, split this one over this direction. So again, in the same way here, we were getting some trailing up here. So if I run a water down to about roughly the center here, I would split that again. So again, if I would have started right at the very beginning, because again, it's very rough terrain. This is a deep ravine. This is a deep ravine. Got a huge cut bank here, deep gullies coming off of that. So it's real tough terrain. This system, that's why things aren't straight. You kind of follow the contours as much as you could, wherever you follow beside the ravine. So you can make, you got to design each system to fit your terrain, basically. Again, this one was that 360 acres to the south and west. Now, this was a unique challenge. This is a living stream running through the Rice Creek. It'll flow probably on most years probably 8 to 9 months out of the year. Again, there's some beaver dams there, so you have some ponding. So this one was a challenge to design. But what was interesting, when I put the cattle in there, they were so used to these small paddocks, 360 acres, they didn't know what to do in there. The neighbor would, my cousin lives down here, and he'd drive by here every day, and cattle would baller and follow them like they were starved. There's all kinds of grass in there. So again, I fixed them. I made them a bunch of little paddocks. Now here I went down to roughly 15 to 20 acre paddocks. Again, I built the center. That's why it's, again, there's a huge hill here. The ridge runs along here. There's a huge hill here. This is some clay pan, some real tough ground. Clay pan areas in here. Here's a draw with nice wooded area here, and then the creek itself. So I split the creek just once. So again, there's 10 miles of drainage that way, and about 6 or 8 probably this other direction. So you can imagine when you get a hard rain upstream, you've got a ridge and river here. So you had to design a system. So here at first it would just take out one part of the fence. So I figured that one out. I just run a hot wire above the water and dangle a wire down. The cattle see that. Once they get used to a high tensile wire, they'll respect that. So you get a hard rain, basically you had no more issue. And this here, I did do a 2-wire fence for the center, and the rest was all just single wire. Again, the riparian area, try and protect that. So when I bring the cattle in, again, we'll probably be running 125 to 130 pair in here. Again, but they're only in each paddock, maybe a total for maybe 4 to 6 days total for the season, during the growing season. Then we'll come back and graze in the dormant season. Right now I do a custom graze. A neighbor brings about 125, 130 each year. And then I'm building up a herd of my own again. So I got about 100 head of my own. And then I went to the smaller framed animals, get into the grass finished. So that's kind of what my plan is now. Anyway, back to this here. When I bring in those 125 head, I'll bring them to the center first. Leave them in there maybe 3-4 days. Open up one of these. We just got overhead gates. Open up one of these. They'll come in here. They'll pick a water point close. Go right back to it. Now, if you leave them in there just 1 day too long, and once, because you've got about 7 paddocks to go through, it'll start to regrow. So that's when you can do damage. So here you got to manage a little closer. So you got them in here, move them over here. They'll pick a water point here, go back to that pasture. So again, you can, and I could see these 20-acre paddocks, how it changes. This year has gotten to be a very good warm season. A lot of diversity in plants, big blue stem, green needle. I mean, there's a lot of diversity out there.
Did you seed those, or they're just coming up?
They come on their own. Before, basically, our pastures look like this carpet in the fall. It was always overgrown, especially your draws. Those plants were there, but they're very weak in state. But here, by letting them rest, again, a short time in each pasture, it's resting sometimes almost a whole year. Again, they're only in there 6-7 days or 4 to 6 days for the whole season. again, we'll probably graze, most of the time, 2/3 of our pastures only get grazed once throughout the season. Like say we graze some in late May, June, we'll probably graze them again in October, again for a day or two. So, but again, so you can imagine, you can see the tremendous amount of rest where you're building the ruts. I mean, at first when I started this, again, it was so totally degraded. It took about 4 to 5 years before things went from no grass to I thought was too much grass. Again, but what was happening, I was building, things were happening underground. I was building a deep root system. And that, I mean, you can get through a drought, or in the past, there's real fragile, the light soil, and there's real dry years. If you get 2 or 3 years in a row, you basically had no growth there at all. So some years there was nothing out there. You couldn't even graze. But we had the river bottoms to back up. We could graze down there and then come back late in the fall. So.
Just a practical question, Ken.
Sure.
I like that mob grazing pattern. How do you said you use electric, high tensile?
Yeah.
How do you charge that?
This here actually I can go back. My power source is here's the abandoned farm, so I got power here. I'm running power out to this center, down to this, through here, across here, down a mile down to other paths here. So I'm running over 4 miles. Again, you have to have a strong energizer, grounded well. Right now I've got one that puts out, I think it's a 12 joule, and I got 3 ground rods around the well house where that's mounted in. Again, you train the animals, even the custom cows, they were never used to electric fence. And again, I'll be showing some pictures. The top wire is probably a little above my knee. And before when we started, we went with hot and a ground. Now I just go with 1 wire hot. But again, if you ground it well and train the animals, if in the yard, I use my corral, one side was at 7 wires, every other one hot. That's where I train, like if I bring bulls in, and I put the cattle in there at first. So once they get a shock and they see that smooth wire, that's in their mind forever. Because I brought a bull home, and at times I wouldn't even leave the power on because my cattle are so used to it. They see that smooth wire and they respect it. Well, I had it off and I brought a bull in, and of course in the spring lush grass grew in. Well, he just could walk right through it because again we put our posts quite far apart. So I beat him to the shed and run him in. I beat him to the shed where I had the energizer on, flipped it on. He come there and he hit that. Again, he got, every other one was hot on there. So he got full shock, about knocked him over. He just bent his head and looked at it and says, something wrong here. He never touched the fence again. So again, you gotta give them a good shock. They get a little tickle and go through it. You spoil them and you got troubles. But again, even with the wire very low out in the pastures, the first few times through, sometimes the cows will get a shock and jump it. But after 2 or 3 moves, it's amazing how fast they will respect that. And then their calves learn that also, so they go, once you keep them, they will not, I mean, they're trained for life. Again, there we got roughly 3 paddocks, and this picture I took, this here used to look like the carpet. That's big blue stem taller than the cows. And you can switch your pastures just by, I can switch it from a very diverse mixture of warm season plants, diversity of plants out there. And we basically had our own herd and we sold down, and then we started custom grazing, and we brought the cattle. He'd always bring his cattle about the 1st of June, and that was too late. Basically, our Kentucky Blue got into a winter cycle, and the Kentucky Blue just started taking over. We started getting too much litter. Kentucky Blue, I'll be showing some slides later how it reacts. But anyway, you can switch it back to a diversity of native again. You raise it large numbers, but for a short time, and you leave the ground covered, and you can really change the high stock density, the rest and recovery. That is the key to it. And now we're also switching our pastures, our irrigated ground back to a pasture. People say you're totally nuts. You can plant $7 corn in here, which it was last year, $8 corn. Again, we used to This pivot was half, usually would have it half corn, half hay. That was, we'd flip it back and forth about every 4 or 5 years. Till it usually with the winter, the alfalfa would either winter kill or whatever. So then we would, again, rotate back and forth. Well, that used to put more inputs. And now we seeded it back to a diverse mixture of grasses and legumes. There's about 11 grasses in there and about 4 or 5 legumes. Now I throw in some forbs besides. Again, I'm trying to imitate native range, what diversity of plants does. Again, feeding the different soil biology. So you can create a very healthy system. And I still got a long way to go. This ground hasn't totally healed yet from back in the tillage days. So it's going to take a while. I first started with half the pivot in 2006, and I was seeding the other half last year, experimenting what different types of grasses work better. Again, when we graze this, first we started with 1 water point, and I did a wagon wheel here. And this soil varies so much in here. Here's my best soil in my farm is basically about right here. This is the highway. The darn highway wouldn't be there. It would have been a lot easier. We got a pivot here too, half circle here. Could have just went across the highway, but the traffic going down to the casino, they don't like that. Anyway, we had this as a wagon wheel. Well, that didn't work out. One evening the pivot stopped here, but it didn't shut off. Very heavy soil right by the pivot, or by the center, and you just muck that up. Out here you got clay pan. Over here it's pure sand. There's a ridge, a hill along here, so it is a challenge to irrigate also, because going down the hill, the water runs down the track, get down a low spot here, pivot comes and gets stuck. So again, we had to heal this land, and by putting it into perennial grass and legumes, you're going to create an environment. Again, it'll be able to, you should eliminate a lot of the rutting from the pivot. Again, with the high stock density in here we'll run anywhere from, I'll run my herd on the pivot and the river bottom. So again, we keep our calves, we calve in May, late May and June. June 1st is our due date. And we won't wean those calves till March, into March. And then we wean them for about a month. They never in a corral, basically we just sort them in a corral, and then we bale graze by the yard, and then turn them back with the herd a month later. And then, so you got the yearlings running with the cows. So anyway, we run our herd from the pivot down to the river bottom, back and forth. So when we graze out here, I redesigned it, so these are your permanent fences. So you could actually hay it yet. It's before, when it's long and narrow, you cross all the ruts. This way you're farming with the rut, with the angle. And so I added more water points. Again, that's your most expensive cost. So each paddock has each water point has 4 paddocks. But then we also run a hot tape and split those, again, to get tremendous. There it's more of a mob grazing. We're getting very high density. Again, a short time in there. But here with the pivot, we graze that. We give it about 30-40 days rest, and we're back to it. And this, in 2010, or 2011, I got 111 grazing days per acre. Again, you have no inputs. We add no fertility. The only thing, the pivot is there, and the water, it takes a lot less water than when we used to grow crops. Because again, you keeping the ground totally covered, and you're way more efficient. So that there, again, if you figured out pounds of beef per acre that you can produce, I mean, you're going to produce better than growing a corn crop. So basically, our irrigated ground, we're seeding back to grass, and all our dry land is being seeded back to grass. I seed back about 50 acres each year. So I'm down to, I've got about 75 acres left to seed. So that's what we do on our pivot. And again, there's 18 paddocks, they average about 7 acres each. And again, we split those on weekends. Some days I just experiment. Then I'll do a true mob. I'll just give them about every hour, give them about just a fraction of an acre, and just to see what that impact has for your next year. But it takes about 3 years before you get your grasses really established. The first year will be pretty much your legumes. So we did run into some issues grazing that. We had foot problems when it grazed. That's too lush. So we'll actually try and balance our diet by, we put straw out there by the center. We just set a bale of straw out there. But again, here you can see how it's easy. It's just a hot tape around the water tank, crowded around the water tank. And they respect that hot tape because they always know they're going to be moved. So they'll, it's very easy. And then the rest is all one wire. The only place we got 2 wires is, I'll go back, wherever the pivot crosses, especially in your inside ones, usually get deeper ruts, this is heavier soils, and then with the side hills. So what I'll do is with 2 wires, I'll have them probably about maybe 30 inches the top one, and the bottom one down another foot. I tie those 2 together, so when the pivot comes there, catches the bottom wire, pulls the top one, you got a carriage underneath, and it just crosses right over it. So it, and then the rest are all just, I say, 1 wire. But it doesn't take long to build something like that. Wrong way here. Again, kind of back to when I started, basically season long. You got low stock density, turn a bunch of animals out in a big pasture. This is what you create. Each time a cow bites that, you get regrowth. Say a week, 10 days later, she comes back to that same plant. Now I got this one is starting to regrow. You got another one over that's getting more rank. She's going to bite this one. So eventually, every time it gets bitten, some of the roots have to die to send up a new shoot. Eventually, you get out a very shallow root system. And again, that's what you call overgrazing. And then again, very low production. So you can imagine it coming into a drought. How long is this plant going to last compared to the one over there? And again, manage grazing, get high stock density, even out with a lot of rest, recovery, you get a very massive root system. Very deep, a lot more tillering, and again, very, very high production. We basically doubled our stocking rate out there. We're probably growing 3 times the grass we used to. But again, we utilize that excess grass in the dormant season. So when my custom cows leave, we'll have stockpiled grass out there. If the weather allows, we can graze well into December, January. When the snow gets too deep, then we switch to cover crops and then bale grazing. So you can start cutting your costs. We used to feed, on average, it was usually about 6 months out of the year. As soon as the crop fields were combined, the cattle had to be out there because it was basically the native pasture was pretty bare already. So we basically went from no grass to plenty of grass out there. And again, we cut our grazing from 6 months. 2 winters ago, we fed for 75 days. The rest of the time they were grazing. That was full feed. And the last year, we had a feed for about 120 days because it was so cool in the spring. We went into a very dry fall. I didn't want to take these paddocks down too far. To me, it's more important to leave that litter on the surface to feed the soil biology underneath. So like again, I was saying before, got to take care of the critters below the ground. The herd below the ground, to me, is more important than the herd above ground. That takes priority. So once you start thinking that way, I mean, you can be very profitable at it too. Again, grazing readiness in the spring, you want at least 3 to 4 leaf length, probably 6 inches of growth before you clip it. If you clip it too soon, basically you're taking your solar panels off, and especially on season long, you probably cut your production down by better than half just by grazing too early in the spring. But once you get into a system with all these paddocks, you've got stockpile grass. Times I'll be out grazing in March if I got paddocks where I'm getting too much litter, trying to get that Kentucky bluegrass. That comes on very early, so you got lush growth, plus you got all the old. The cattle will balance their diet on that, and they do very well. But again, we're extending our grazing season in the spring and in the fall, and then plus in the winter. Again, too early, especially season long. First of all, there's a lot of production out there. It's high quality. It's too high in quality, basically, because you don't have no old litter out there. so they can't balance their diet. So actually their performance actually goes downhill. And eventually, overgrazing season long, eventually you start getting a lot of bare spots, open ground, your weeds start moving in, your sagebrush or whatever. So you get a lot of annual weeds growing in there. Again, you get a lot of bare ground. The no use to me is probably worse than total overuse. Again, it looks good from the distance, but this here basically was joins my pasture. This was season-long grazing probably for 50, 60, 70 years, and now it's laid idle for about 20-some years. So it basically went from a diverse native pasture to it's probably 90-some% Kentucky blue, a little bit of leafy spurge, and a few sagebrush in there. So that went from that's what no use will do. And now this here same parcel, the guy brought in a bunch of horses, bucking broncs. So we went from no use to tremendous amount of use. But no use, eventually you just create a tremendous litter, and basically it's like a thatch, and the water can't even get into the soil. It basically just runs off. And again, there's no life because you're basically it's dead. There's no soil biology left, and very few insects. So it's basically that's what it looked like now. This here top corner, the horses would congregate here, and took that from that picture before to this. You can see the rills are after the rain. That's manure here. So I did run because the horses always crowded here, and they're tearing the fence down and get into mine. So I just run a hot tape around the corner, and so I'm just going to leave that and see what happens. Basically from.
Is that leafy spurge?
That's leafy spurge along the fence line. Yeah. Now this year we had. I would say there probably was on. I probably had about 300 to 400 acres of solid spurge in that pasture land, or that native range up through the draws, and we used insects. We took that down. I got it in another or part of this presentation. I'll go through that a little later, but I show you how you can manage leafy spurge without chemical. Again, a healthy range. You have diversity out there. You got all kinds of plants, forbs, cool season, warm season. Again, you get tremendous vigor. And here you can see the hot wire, and that's big blue stem, 4 or 5 feet tall. So that you went basically from a carpet to that over time. Again, it's all high stock density, short time in a paddock, let it rest, and then come back to it. Then a person would think, well, from the center where you get all that impact, the water point was right here. It's looking out. There's a lot of western wheat there, where you got tremendous amount of impact. It's amazing how fast that you can change that grass. Again, it keeps the nutrition way longer in the year. You see a cow pat, it's a little dished. That tells you you're about the right nutrition out there. And this was probably late August when most of your pastures are really drying up. We've tested the nutrients in late December. The nutrients on these native pastures met the needs of a lactating cow. That's where we're running our calves on the cows yet at that time. So again, you're creating a way healthier environment, so you got healthier plants, higher nutrition, so you won't have to supplement either. At the end of the season, like I say, I want grass out there. I want a tremendous amount of cover. Again, gives us the option of stockpile grass. You can winter graze, or it's just there to basically feed the soil. So
that looks like to me a lot of blue grama seed heads in that grass. Is that right?
This year there'd probably be some blue grama in there, but this would have been there's grama. Well, there probably would be some Kentucky blue in there also, but our blue grama, again, when we went to this type of management, it's still there, but again, it's a very nutritious grass, but not a lot of production. It's still a component, but our other species with way higher production, your green needle and thread, your western wheat, your big blue stem, way more higher production. So it's all, again, it's all a balance.
And if I'm remembering right, that buffalo grass doesn't have a lot of above ground production, but it has a pretty extensive root system, doesn't it?
We'll find some of that here, but not a lot. Again, it depends on your soil types.
Yeah.
Again, these are a lot of the clay pans. So we're getting these some of these grasses move into these clay pan areas that these guys say shouldn't be there. But we're creating an environment that they will survive. And the big blue was, before it was strictly in the draws. Now it's moving up the side hills to the clay pan areas because we're holding the moisture, it's not running off. Just like this here example. And one this afternoon will be showing where on season-long grazing, the amount of runoff you get compared to rotational grazing. So you created an environment for these other species. You're holding this water in the soil profile, so you're creating an environment for different types of grasses that are way higher production. So, again, it's all about diversity of plants. We're going to go till about 12, I suppose.
You can talk that long.
I can talk as long as you want.
I never take speaking engagements in less than 20 minutes. It doesn't work for me, so we could leave a little earlier if you wanted to. We never can tell how busy they're going to be. Last time they were out of nipples too, so let that be your guide.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take off now. Okay. Okay. Lost my train of thought here now.
Oh, sorry.
Talking about food now.
Yeah.
Anyway, people say that, well, this voodoo fence building this high tensile wire, and people are so used to a physical barrier. High tensile wire with electric, it's all psychological. So you got to get in the animal's mind that this is what it's all about.
I've never heard that term.
Voodoo? Well, I mean, it was amazing when I started working in Burleigh County. There was very little high tensile wire electric fence because people remember what electric fence was back when I was growing up. They created fire a lot because the charge on these is way different. The low impedance, so you got a quick charge and then off. It's where the other one was a longer charge, and if you had stuff growing on there, you could ignite it and cause fire. But anything touching it usually shorted it out too. So it got such a bad name. Plus they used this real light wire, and it always was broke and shorted out, and cattle were always out. Where this high tensile, this is single strand of this 12.5 gauge is 2.5 times stronger than a strand of barbed wire. So it's kind of ugly to work with. But it takes different tools. But I don't know how long it's going to last. We put some of this stuff in the mid 80s. It doesn't look any different than when we put it in. Barbed wire put in at that time, it's all rusted already. So
what I like about that, Ken, it's not as, we've never used barbed wire, just always concerned about animals getting caught and safety issues. Do you ever use the roping?
Yeah, we'll use like on pivot.
Yeah.
There we used a poly rope.
You use that.
Yeah,
and
pushing
crosswise,
post.
I've never crossed that out. Is there one that's more beneficial than the other because we've never used that?
Oh, these high tensile, they're 4,000 foot rolls. They're a little over $100. So they're actually a lot cheaper.
Much cheaper.
And then the longevity of this.
And you don't use those temporary staples?
No, here we put in permanent posts, and we either wood posts or it's the wood posts you get now are just crap. The treat they use on them. We bought some of these that last 4 or 5 years and they rotted off. So we use steel, and if you use a good insulator, we like these Pinlock insulators of black. We don't like the yellow. They're not as ultraviolet resistant. Plus, coyotes like to eat them when it's off in the winter. It's something that tracks that color. I don't know what it is, but the black ones they don't touch, but the yellow they'll chew them. Of course, it's on. They're not going to chew them, but we'll usually use a 5.5 foot T-post, and of course the wire. I mean, you could get by with easily a 5 foot post too. This here just showing some of the landscape timbers used for kiwi braces. When I first started, I went 2 wires. Strainer is required for programs. But a spring on there, it's optional, but spring gives it a little more give. We normally don't have it very tight. You have a looser, it seems like an insulator stand up better. And your snow load, And then by putting 2 wires, I think one about 8 inches below the other, and that can create a problem too when you go, say you're going 90, 100 feet apart with your posts, something does jump through it, tangles them, well, then you got your fence shorted out. So once you getting probably got 20 some miles of interior fence. So normally we have shutoffs at the center, so we usually only energize the paddock they're in. But if we're way to the south, well then of course you need a lot of energized. So it can be, but then you got a fault finder that can tell you where the short is, so that saves a lot of time. So you can test it, so you know that it's on. Anyway, at first I did the 2 wire. My object was for wildlife. I wanted top one not very high, and then the bottom on ground. I figured I was going to train the calf, but it was amazing how quick they learned it anyway. So now I just go with one wire, about 30 inches up.
Would that work to keep deer out of a large?
No, deer will jump over it.
That's what I thought.
But you can keep them out of your garden. Then you put about 7, 8 of them out.
Oh, yeah, no. No, I wanted to get away with the one right about.
Well, I mean, it's very, very cheap. I mean, you could build a hot wire around a garden.
Yeah, because we built an actual fence around our garden, but I'd like to plow up the neighbor's 3/4 acre, and I don't want to fence that in because they won't.
What was that term you used?
Plow up. Well, actually, what I do is I'm sorry. I was gonna burn down the weeds and plant potatoes and squash over there, but I have to keep the deer out, and they won't rent us the property, and they won't sell us the property. I just, I've never been one stick to real terms. I speak this way all the time.
I mean, a temporary garden too, you easily use that poly rope. It's amazing how fast you train the deer too.
Really? Poly rope will keep them out? It's got to be what, 6 or 8?
Well, you got, because I mean, they're smart, they'll jump over.
Yeah.
So you just put them about this far apart, have every other one hot. And once they touch that once, they get a shock, right? And then they see they can't jump over it, so. And they can't go under it. Normally a deer will go under a fence. He's too lazy to jump too.
Are you kidding me? God, I hate deer. They're so like, they'll get up on their hind legs and eat our apples off our tree. That's the ones that died in the flood. Now, of course, nobody's eating apples. So, okay, well, that settles that then.
And if you want to keep out the coons and you want all that,
Oh, I forgot about the raccoons.
So.
I gotta learn how to use a gun better.
You don't want to kill them, they're good.
I know, my husband said, well, oh, really? The raccoons are good?
Sure. Everything's got a purpose. Coyotes, I will not shoot a coyote.
No, we like our coyotes.
Because basically kill the coyotes.
Then they won't kill the raccoons, right?
No, well then the buddy will come in, he'll probably kill your cattle. So if you don't have any problem, livestock losses, don't kill the coyotes. Because they have their territory.
Can you hear them yelling at night when they make a kill? We hear that all the time.
We got lots of out there, but I won't shoot a coyote unless he's in trouble.
Yeah, but we keep our cat indoors because we know that's potential food.
Anyway, here I just wanted to show it a single wire, and this is what our pastures look like late in the fall. So again, how much cover you got on there. Kiwi raised, very simple to make, and
so those posts are white.
It's just white. These are wooden posts here. It just shows like they're white there. But we've used. I've tried. Well, actually, you can see one here. I used as a brace here. These what we call them diaper posts. They're this recycled plastic, but they don't. They won't rot. But when it gets cold, they just snap off. So they're kind of worthless. So, but we tried those on a different unit, and they're very quick to put in. They were very cheap at first. You could buy a 7.5 footer for. I think they were $3.50 or something. We cut them in half and push them in. The top wire would rest on top of that post. They're tough to drive. And little bitty staples on top. You could drive it in, and inside you had to hold them all and drive it. But you didn't need no insulator. But they just don't stand up over the winter. So we quit those. Those are wooden posts there, but now you just go with steel. And again, use a decent insulator. I like to pin lock the black, whether it's wooden or steel. Of course, we've got deep gullies. It's hard to see, but the fence here, we just built a fence right across the top. All I do is dangle a wire down into the ravine. Cattle come there, they see that dangled wire, they will not cross it. So, and again, you get snow load. Snow will not knock down electric fence. It takes me longer to fix my border fence. I will not build a barbed wire fence anymore. You know, our border fences are going to be, then I'll go 3-wire, too hot. And again, you build a physical barrier. Postage will quite far apart, but I'll build it higher and a hot wire in between. But anyway, across the gully, you get a snow load, your fence is there the next spring. You'll probably have an insulator here and there. Some does run through in the wintertime or something, but it's very, very easy to maintain. Now here, just showing another one. Fence went across the top. Then I built one across here. Well, if you get a real heavy rain, possibly we'll take this one out, but at least your other fences are shorted out. But what's interesting here, these deep ravines, this used to be bare soil, and now we've got grass growing. So just, again, the herd impact, how it's changed. But there'll be an example of showing here the fence is right close to the bear cut bank. Still, you can see the open gully. The fence went across. This first photo was taken out here. This area used to be about 6 to 8 foot deep. You can see it's starting to silt in, starting to get grass growing there. Now I'm out probably another 200-300 feet. The first photo was right here, second was here. When I built the fence, you can see there's an insulator in the bottom of the post. It used to be a gully that's totally filled in. So again, herd impact out there, you created the environment. Pretty soon you got grass growing in those hooves and the hoof imprints, and you got the right environment, and pretty soon it's grassed over. So we can, what a little bit we'll do. And here's where 2 deep gullies come together. It's probably about 80 foot across. This is a railroad tie. I was real ambitious. But that was over 20 some years. It's basically, this was a bare bottom, pure sand, bentonite or whatnot. Now it's western wheatgrass growing in that environment. So basically you can heal the land erosion just by cattle impact. So again, building a grazing system, water is pretty much your limiting factor. You need water, and you got to design it for a lot more water than what you think you need. Because again, if you're going to double your stocking rate, you're going to need double the water. And again, you're not getting the runoff, so your ponds don't get the water in them like they used to either. We used to rely on dams and dugouts, and again, that pour water off the cut banks, you get a lot of bentonite in it. So spring they would drink it, but in the summer they'd walk a mile to where we had a windmill tank by the yard. Again, you can imagine what you got then. Season long, it congregated where the water was when it was hot, kept that totally overgrazed, and the other end of the pasture they probably didn't touch. So anyway, we like these fiberglass tanks. This is a 20-foot diameter, so that holds about 4,500 gallons. Again, like I showed that first picture, we were running water a mile, lifting it probably 20, 30 feet. So at the end of this, you're probably only getting a gallon, 2 gallons a minute probably. But again, by putting in a huge tank, the behavior of the animals changes. Like they're in a small pasture, so the whole herd doesn't come and drink at once. They're just staggering in and out all day. So then your calves always got access to water too. So water is, I say, it's the most expensive thing to put in. But now with, back when I put this in, it had to be in deep. It couldn't be trenched. It had to be backhoed. That's some crazy rules. Now we just put them in shallow. So it makes it, with the PE pipe they have now, we don't even, like on the pivot, it's shallow, it's probably only down 1.5 feet. And I basically don't even blow those lines out. They can freeze. Again, you can get it into 5,000 foot rolls, so you have no splice. So you don't, you can let it freeze. All you do is open the hydrant at the end, or basically our float, the valve, open that, in the well pit. I'll open that, just take the pressure off, basically, shut that off and let it, and it can freeze. And then we've done that since 2006 in there, and it's never had an issue yet. So the shallow pipeline, is making it a lot more economical to bring water. And you can push water a tremendous distance. You just can't, if you got a lot of lift, then you need a lot of pressure. Then there's all kinds of, these rubber tire tanks work out quite well. They're indestructible. They're heavy to set. Especially the bigger ones, you almost need a payload to move them. They're so heavy to get them set.
That's your float in the tank.
That's a float. Yeah, here, this isn't mine, but I just got some examples. But yeah, I basically got a float here. I think this runs the well is right there. This is the well here, so it's basically just pumping direct out of the well with the float system there. But those rubber tires work out real well. And some use these steel tanks and big rims, especially for a windmill, but they don't seem to galvanize. They're cemented in. It doesn't seem like they last too long. They rust out. So that's where I like the fiberglass for the bigger tanks. And again, we still have our backup water. This is one of our dams. But what's kind of unique, you notice there's grass growing right up to the water's edge. Well, before, when that was season long, you'd imagine if you brought 100 cows in there, they'd just muck that up, and you'd have poor quality water for them and the wildlife. Even this here I didn't like, so I'm changing that. I'm going to fence the dams out, and I'm going to set a tank right here and use the solar to pump water into it. So I've got three dam sites. What I'm going to do that, and I'll just move that solar unit to each one. I'll have a permanent tank by each one, but just move the solar unit. So, but again, you got high quality water for wildlife, and it's a backup for if my well does go down or something. But that's been pretty foolproof. That well, we put that in let's say the mid '80s, and only a couple of times I burned out. Of course, pumps don't last, so burn some of those out. But all in all, it's been working out very well. Again, back to the shallow pipeline, the PE pipe, the high density, and equipment they got now as far as putting it in. You can either trench it. Again, a lot of them fuse it. You can fuse it together, so you have no brass coupler in there. And because normally, if you got brass and you don't drain it, that's where you'd have it break. But again, if it's only a foot or two down, you'll find that very easily. You don't need to bring a backhoe. You can shovel that out and put a splice in. You can have it fixed. But again, fused over brass fittings. This was a guy designed this plow. Basically, the line runs through the top, through the spool. You can drive as fast as you can walk. You can lay pipeline. So it, again, very economical.